And hello, welcome to another Data and API show. I'm going to look around and make sure I'm not on mute. Hey, success so far. We're doing good. Today, I have here on the Data and API show with me, Jesse, who is a fellow Hasurian, and Denis, who together are going to combine forces and tell everybody about GraphQL-ws and how that fits into Relay. So I'm going to disappear like I do and live tweet / hang out in chat and let you two take it from here.
Disappear like I do. I like that. That's a nice way to put it. So, Denis, why don't you give the people a quick shout as to what it is you do? Because if people are tracking GraphQL, you've done some things that people may have heard about, and just kind of who you are, what you do, and some of that kind of detail.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Denis. I'm from Vienna, from Austria, and I work at Domonda. Basically, what I did and what this talk will be about is GraphQL-ws. I am the author of this library, and it basically is the next version of Subscriptions Transport WS by Apollo. It aims to implement a fully compliant GraphQL over WebSocket protocol, which will allow any GraphQL user to transmit data through a WebSocket connection. Yep, that's about basically it.
That's it.
That's it.
Just rewrote one of the fundamental technologies for subscriptions with GraphQL. That's it. So that's good.
Just that, yeah.
Can you give like a 5-minute, or less, whatever, but like a quick comparison of where is what's the difference between the transport WS that everybody was kind of familiar with having to import to their projects and the one that you wrote? Like, what were some of the main fundamental changes of the technology here?
Yeah. So a while ago, like many of us, I had the task of integrating real time to my app. And of course, the first thing everybody's mind comes to is WebSockets. So I Googled and I stumbled upon Subscriptions Transport WS, which is exactly implementation of GraphQL over WebSocket. And I immediately kicked it off with that library. However, it basically was a bit broken. So there were a few challenges that I had to immediately circumvent inside the code itself to introduce a few bug fixes just to get stuff working. But basically, it laid grounds on how you should do communication of GraphQL through a WebSocket. Apollo's team did a great job, and they also have a specification that describes this communication that they specifically implemented. And of course, they also provide a library, which is named before Subscriptions Transport WS. So a few things that I changed inside their protocol, so inside the specification itself, is I terminated and I removed the GraphQL connection terminate message. This message was basically a message that gets sent before the connection itself gets closed. And it is supposed to communicate stuff about reasons about why the connection is actually closing. I completely removed it because there is a WebSocket equivalent, which is just calling close, providing your own close code together with a close reason. And this is sufficient enough to handle all possible error cases which could lead to WebSocket termination. You can even go one step further and incorporate, stringify a JSON object inside of the message itself, send it to the client, and have a bit more meaningful error messages. Then what I did is I also cut off the pings and pongs. So the original legacy specification had a keep alive mechanism integrated in it, and I kicked it off basically to leverage the WebSockets specification level heartbeat, which also offered pings and pongs. And these were frames that are basically integrated inside your client, either if you're using a browser like Firefox or Chrome, or if you're using the WS library, the pings and pongs get automatically implemented. But the problem here is that these pings and pongs are on the specification level of WebSocket, and some of the server implementations like AWS API Gateway didn't offer pings and pong message. They didn't implement that part. And also some clients like browsers don't allow you to control the ping and pong, so the keep alive mechanism. So we still had to introduce ping and pong mechanism inside this new protocol, inside this new specification. And I also took it one step further by allowing you to provide a specific payload along with the ping or the pong message. And this would allow you to have more metrics about the connections, like the latency, and also have delays or measuring how long the server or the client was offline before kicking it off. After that, I also introduced a bit more security tightening to the specification itself. So I strictly allow valid messages being those that have been specified by the protocol. All of the others will result in an immediate termination of the connection, so that the client basically cannot send anything outside what the protocol allows you to. And I also introduced basically another security measure, which requires each of the clients to authenticate themselves through the WebSocket connection. So once the client establishes a connection, just a connection with the server, it should send an connection initialization message and have a response, which is actually an acknowledgement message from the server that says to the client, yeah, you're good to go. All of the parameters and all of the checks against you have passed. You can now proceed with making subscriptions or even queries and mutations. So this is the basics of what I changed in the actual protocol itself. And furthermore, I implemented a brand new library which implements this protocol, and went around and just fixed all of the bugs and all of the issues that subscriptions transport had, and just added a leaner, a fresher approach to the subscription world, mainly leveraging JavaScript and the library being zero dependencies. It's just lean, small, and very useful inside your environment. Besides that, the server is also an interface. So basically, the server part inside the library is able to integrate with any server that you throw at it, being that the regular WS or UVS or Cloudflare WebSockets, which were introduced recently. All of that can be integrated with the library and can be used cross-platform from both sides. So yeah, it was quite a journey, and I had the original talks with the GraphQL Foundation and discussing this whole process of how we could proceed with the transition of a new library for WebSockets. And basically, I got the green light of doing all of this, and the specification and the protocol is pushed as a PR to the GraphQL over HTTP work group, which aims to standardize and write a specification that describes exactly how GraphQL communication should be done over an HTTP connection. So fingers crossed. I hope that this one day becomes the de facto standard of the WebSocket communication.
Because to this day, there's not actually a standardized spec for subscriptions in the GraphQL specification, right? That's still something that's always been vendor specific in how it's executed, right?
Exactly. So it's really up to you. And from what I got from the talks that I attended is that Facebook uses their own protocol of communicating GraphQL through WebSockets, so they don't care actually how others do it. And Apollo built the protocol originally, but because of a lot of work and a lot of great things that they did, they kind of abandoned the project, which is completely understandable. But basically, it was always, it just either works. And one key factor was that subscriptions transport WS for so long was the only library that you could use. Just install, plug and play, and get going with WebSockets. So it basically is used a lot, and a lot of people depend on this protocol, which you don't even have to read, which is also the idea behind GraphQL WS, just a bit modern.
Yeah, and it's actually officially a part of the you are a part of the guild, right? The GraphQL guild, and this is one of the tools that are a part of that offering that they've put together, right?
Yes, exactly. So it ships with some of the tools from the guild, like the GraphQL tools, which probably a lot of you have used, and other libraries like, I don't know, the GraphQL-ws and integrations for the new envelope plugin system for GraphQL, etc., etc.
Yeah. So, like for the audience watching, knowing all of that is not required for implementing the benefits that you're going to get from it. So I mean, just somebody who implements libraries and doesn't write them myself, I'm super grateful for people like you who put in that kind of work to get that working. So today the menu we have is basically, we're going to look at a very contrived example, because one thing to also talk about with GraphQL subscriptions, and it's not something I think we're even going to dive in too much today. There's a lot of reason to also discuss like when you really need subscriptions, because sometimes it's overused, but like when you need it, there's not a better way. And so we have a little bit of a contrived example that I've done with kind of the standardized Apollo route. And we're going to look at how would you swap out the GraphQL-ws, like put that in instead of the socket. And then we're going to look at an example you put together of using Relay, which is also a fantastic tool and framework, really. And so we're going to have a look at that towards the end. So that should be a lot of fun. I will go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to try something here that's a little bit untested from my side. I'm going to share the window here. I'm going to try doing this through a code space to see if we can actually make that play here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the correct window, I hope. It should be here. So let me try and zoom that in just a little bit for some visibility benefits. This is a user beer demo, so you know that it's an authentic project that I put together because it has the word beer in it. But what we're going to do is we're going to just try and run this up inside of a code space and see if we can actually run this example locally. If not, then I'll have to switch to VS Code on my machine, but we'll try. All right, so we're inside, so I probably need to go ahead and try running the dependencies here. And then I believe, if I remember how I set up this project, I do need to scaffold out my utilities. Because what I'm doing is I'm using GraphQL-ws, which does some type, nothing against the guild, against GraphQL code gen. But this is just the one that I happen to use, which is, I think I just called it the SDK here. I think I'm going to have to do something very, very incorrect here, and that's actually just paste my certificates here live. So that's all fun. I'm going to go ahead and just grab those from my local project and just throw those up here. So we'll have to burn this later on anyways. We'll see if anybody's able to screen grab that fast enough and torch the project before we can actually demo something here. But we'll just see what we get. We'll run that now down inside of this try place. What that does is it actually goes out, just for those that aren't familiar, it goes out, it checks the endpoint, and it scaffolds out kind of like an SDK that you're able to use for querying content, which is kind of a helpful thing. So I think everything should be ready to try. Let's go ahead and get this set up here. And I'm running now on a ported host here. So it should be connecting me to the forwarded port. We'll see how this all works. Supposedly, I mean to the forwarded port. I think it's going there. All right. So now it's, yeah. All right, good. So we have the subscriptions here created. So very contrived example. We have two users with a couple of with some beers, and I'm going to open up my project here inside of Hasura, And we're going to write some subscriptions basically showing how this sort of works. So I'm going to go to my project that I'm going to paste over into here. And let's see what we got. All right. So I'm not able to show both at the same time. That's the only problem. Oh, well. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is what we have is I have this project here. You can see the data. It's a simple data model. What we have here is, you zoom it in a little bit. We have the beer table. We have the user table. We have a join table of user beers. And then if I go to the API tab and I want to go ahead and mutate some of these where I actually insert some user beers, I'm going to show once basically kind of how this works from like switching between tabs. So I'm going to just mutate, add some beers here. So I'm going to insert some user beers. Come on. And I'm going to go ahead and pass in the beer ID of some random number here. I think I've got at least 45 in there. And the user ID, I want to add some to the other user here, which I think is just user 2. And I want to go ahead and give just respond back with the ID of that transaction. All right, so if I go ahead and I run this mutation, then what we should see, if we come back over here, yeah, we'll see right away that it just pops up with the beer for this new user. So if I run this a couple of times, so 1, 2, 3, 4, we'll see that it updates automatically. So pretty cool, pretty standard stuff. The typical subscription approach of how that works, we run, a query kind of like this. We'll say something like, get beers, and then we'll go drop down on user, and we'll get the name of the user, the beers, and the that's the way my model is. The name of the beer. So we have kind of the standard subscription. What I can do to kind of also demonstrate is I'm going to run that subscription, so it's starting now, and I can kind of see here what's happening. If I were to take this tab and I open this up in a different window and run those same mutations that we had just done, we can see them also, the subscriptions updating much more real time here. I'm going to just grab these in the window you can't see right now, so you aren't seeing things on purpose. So I'm going to go ahead and run another mutation right now, and we can see just that really rapidly inserts. So that's the benefit of subscriptions. You have this idea of real-time connections. You can view things. So let's look at the code, what we have here. So we've proven that we're using subscriptions. We've proven that it's actually working. So that's all well and good. Let's have a look at the actual code side of it now to see where we're implementing the Apollo client. And if we go to the, I think I'm under utils if I recall, right? Yeah, Apollo client. We have a pretty standard approach here. Let me zoom in a little bit. So we have the HTTP link, and then we have the WebSocket link that we're just connecting to our system, and then we have a split link method that just says, okay, is it a subscription or is it a regular query? Go ahead and flip flop that if it needs to be the WS or the HTTP connection. And then we make our queries through the client. So from here, like this is kind of a really vanilla standard approach that probably 80% of people have something pretty similar to this. From here, where would be the starting point to start to try to swap out from the typical WebSocket approach to using GraphQL-ws?
So I'd start by installing GraphQL-ws. I think it's already installed. I saw it in the packages JSON, so it's just add.
I think so too, because I think I had pre-installed it, but I will just do it again.
Awesome. So then what you can do is import the GraphQL-ws in your Apollo client. Import the client. So import brackets, create client from GraphQL-ws. You missed an R there. Yep. And then you can pretty much swap the client below with the WebSockets link. So if we head over to the GraphQL-ws repository, there is a recipe that shows you how to integrate a super simple GraphQL-ws Apollo WebSocket link. So just go a bit. Yep, there it is. Not the Apollo link.
Well, that's a little bit of feedback. These drop-down arrows I find.
Yeah, you can click
confusing.
on client or any non-linked text and pretty much just copy that over. So you can select all of that, and that would create an Apollo link that uses GraphQL-ws. And it has some nice error formatting that allows you to see the messages a bit nicer in your console or display them to your client.
I'm going to add the content here at the top. See if we're duplicating any imports. Just the one there, so we can go ahead and
you can remove the
just
top
put this
one
down below. You can get rid of the duplicate GraphQL-ws there.
Yep.
And so from there, basically what we've done is we've got a class constructor that is building out the WebSocket link, which was basically this thing here. So probably want to hide that so we don't.
Yeah.
We don't
and the
get a
client
collision.
that you removed should be the one imported because it has some typings and then more imports. So the GraphQL-ws import that you removed has two more imports: the types of the client and the options. So
this one has the
no.
This one has the client types.
The GraphQL-ws should also import client options and client. So just import client and.
Oh, is that part of the recipe? Can I just yeah. So I'll just remove this one here.
Awesome.
That's better.
Yeah. Comment the old website link out. Yep. And on the bottom, the original WebSocket link used a URI prop, and we use a URL prop. Okay, that's there is.
So this is the one from you, and this is the old one. So we can just take our path there, and then we can paste this up here.
Yes. Exactly.
And then we need the same headers, right?
Yes. Just the whole connection params. Yep. You can copy all of that.
So we'll just copy all of that, and then we'll just delete the thing here. And put that underneath the params. Was it here?
So you can replace the whole connection params here. Just make it a function though. Yeah.
That's as far as it was, or is it right there?
There,
right?
Just paste it in. Yeah, that should work now.
Now it's maybe. So there. I need to change this from link to the name that I had of the WS link, right?
Yes. So WS capital L link. Yes.
And that should link up to here now.
Still work. Yeah.
So theoretically, that was it?
Theoretically, that was it.
Let's give it a shot.
Fingers crossed.
Have you thought about wrapping up that client into its own module, so you could just import that as a top-level object?
Yeah, I just didn't want to maintain an additional library, which is just a wrap-up. So I think somebody else did it. So there should be an Apollo client GraphQL-ws. I'll share you the links.
I'm refreshing the page here. So maybe that this was a code space that I lost my old URL. So let me go ahead and try checking what the new proxy is here.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got an error under the constructor, create client options. WebSocket. So WebSocket implementation is missing.
Okay. So that means that the client is running in a non-browser environment. Okay, we can fix that. So we need to install WS, do yarn add WS.
Yarn add WS. Okay. I'm going to see if I can open up another tab here so I don't have to reboot my environment every time here. Yarn add WS. And that would be probably because this is the Next.js project, so it's bootstrapping on the.
I guess so. So you can try with import WS on the top from WS. So it's a default
import WS. You said.
Yes. Exactly. And then inside the options of the WebSocket link, on the bottom where we instantiate the VS link, just go a bit down. There it is.
Oh, down to the extra WS link.
Exactly. And beneath the URL, do WebSocket impl. So WebSocket with WebSocket with a capital S. WebSocket impl, like implementation, with the capital I. That's it, and pass in WS there.
Yeah.
That should fix it.
Okay. So
it's a morphic environment, and we need an isomorphic WS instance. Try installing instead isomorphic WS. Yeah. Next is not that fun to work with.
WS like this.
Isomorphic WS. Yes, exactly.
So isomorphic. Oh, I gotta add it. I can't just like run a script called isomorphic.
It's no command. All right.
So let me go back to the client here, and instead of this, we could just do it from isomorphic, right?
Yes. Isomorphic WS. That's right.
Go back to our runtime here. Nothing's complaining at the moment. Let's go ahead and refresh this URL here. So WS link is not a function. That might be my bad because of the way that I constructed it. So I need to just basically do that.
Okay.
The reason I think that had been my workaround for the Next.js environment, so that it would not execute that until it.
All of these isomorphic WS installations would have been fixed with this.
Probably.
Yeah, that's okay.
So we've got the users, and now we got the subscriptions. Yeah, that works. I wonder, let's just for fun's sake, let's go ahead and remove the isomorphic install because dependencies are dependencies. And we'll remove that and see if it actually still worked.
Yep.
And we'll go back and refresh that page again here.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that also works. It's just delaying the execution time on that. But I mean, that's not that painful. I mean, the only thing here is you got a lot of copy paste code. I mean, the recipes are super nice. Like this whole thing right there is just replacing that import with a new constructor. Beyond that, this is like nearly identical.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because this too, right? That was. So those two, you could almost totally get rid of those if it was inside of a library. But like beyond that, I mean, it's just totally.
Yeah. And another thing that changed from the old implementation is the reconnecting property. By default, GraphQL WS tries reconnecting 5 times with exponential timeout. So it basically waits for the server to come back by default, which is why we didn't have to pass the reconnecting true property as we did before.
So it's not going to kill your browser on localhost when it's like got an incorrect query like it does typically.
No, it shouldn't.
Okay. I mean, that from my side, that's very painless.
Yeah, and it basically, I was aiming to have the API of my library match the subscriptions transport WSs. There are a few deviations, and they're all in favor of simplifying the library. So it basically is quite extensible. And by reading all the recipes that you can find on the repo, you can do almost quite literally whatever you want with it. And because of this, I cut off a lot of higher level unnecessary things, but introduced a lot of low level stuff. But basically, the API is almost literally the same with same defaults. So it tends to reconnect automatically, silently in the background for you.
That's really cool. I think that's really like a very painless.
I'll be honest
swap
with
out.
you, that was the hardest part of all of this, making the retry mechanism work as expected. So the whole silent idea behind it is that if you have running queries and one of them fail, or the connection even fails because of whatever reason, the client would reconnect automatically with a randomized exponential backoff, and once connected would rerun the queries that got lost, and you will basically get exactly where you were without the connection issues silently. So the user will never notice anything that had happened before. And achieving this was quite hard. Subscription Chessboard this does it as well. But a few things you have to keep in mind with WebSockets and how they work in various environments for you to make that actually a great implementation.
And that was actually like not to toot the Hasura horn too much, but that was I think one of the things, a big feature request was being able to support that from the Hasura side. So I mean, this API just throw some tables at a cloud project, and you've got a subscription enabled server is like kind of painless.
Lovely.
Yeah, great. So that's basically how we would swap out an active one. Let's have a look at the relay example that you threw together. Now, you did a really nice thing of breaking them all out into commits. Let's see if we can kind of do like a rapid fire walkthrough and just series interact.
So basically what this repo starts from is create React app. So you just do your regular create React app with a TypeScript template to get all the nice typings out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I did a pretty RC adjustment, which is super simple. I also stopped the browser from automatically opening it because it was quite annoying. And then I added React Alpha because I wanted to showcase how the concurrency environment works with Relay specifically. So if you click on that, it's quite easy to add React Alpha to the Create React library. So you just do yarn add React at alpha, React DOM at alpha. It changes all of this. Then you replace render with a create root, and you add the typings of the experimental features to your environment. That basically is it. Proceeding, I added relay, if I remember correctly.
So we'll go back to the commits.
Yep. I added
relay, okay.
Yes, exactly. So basically you install React Relay, you install Relay runtime. As developer in dependencies, you install the compiler, you install the TypeScript language, because what Relay does is exactly what Zeus does. It scans all of your project's files for GraphQL tagged queries and basically introspects them and compares them with the schema that you have, creating proper TypeScript typings, which allow you to have really nice autofill and TypeScript security behind it. You also install get GraphQL schema. So this is just a simple thing that you give it an endpoint and it gives you the schema back. Once you installed the required dependencies, you create a config file for Relay. You basically specify what language you want because it defaults to Flow. You specify where the schema is and where the source files is, and you just ignore a few things that you don't need. This schema GraphQL is actually the schema from the Hasura instance. You can collapse that. So this is just an introspection query. Proceeding on, we create a Relay environment. So this file contains everything that Relay should do. So if we start with fetch Relay, you basically make a regular fetch with the post method, you provide the headers and you provide the parameters. What you do in the end is you stringify IDs, and this is something just for this example where a relay requires IDs to be strings. So what I do here is just convert the numbers which are there currently to strings. How you can solve this with Hasura without having to do this, let's say, hack, is to just not use an integer for the IDs or use something like UUIDs, for example. Going along, you basically create a relay environment and pass that into a relay environment provider that you see below in the index TSX. And you wrap that up with a suspense component that will just catch everything that's suspense below it and display a nice loading message. Proceeding on, you also add the Babel plugin relay macro, which is just so that we don't have to install the whole Babel library. You just can use this macro, which has everything built into a single function for converting GraphQL queries and passing them along in the relay runtime. After you added relay, I have an example. So if we go back real quick and list 20 beers. So I just deleted some bootstrap stuff that we don't need. But what I did in the app is imported a GraphQL tag, which you can see from the macro, added a lazy load query. A lazy load query basically does the query request once the component gets mounted. And you define your query there, and you run a yarn relay command, which just reads out your source project and creates generated GraphQL TypeScript queries, which you can see on the top. So the app query is imported from __ generated app query GraphQL file, and it has all the typings listed inside of that. And you basically get the response in the data. Immediately afterwards, you can create a component that has the beer fragment, and that beer fragment just lists out a few beer features like its name and its image. So now we have an environment which is not using any subscriptions, any WebSockets at all. It's just the HTTP connection. And now if we want to listen to every single beer here and update the changes in the UI, we would go to the next commit, add GraphQL, and subscribe on beer. So you would add GraphQL-ws as we did right now. You would import the use subscription hook from React Relay. You would define a GraphQL query like you usually do, pass in which beer you want to subscribe in, and that's literally it. So the beauty of Relay is that it has a single flat store, and all of the records in that store are bound to a global unique ID, and anything from wherever you get in Relay, if the node that you're getting or the record has an ID matching in the existing store, it will update all the fields. So in this case here, we do have a fragment imported that has a beer, which we spread inside of it, inside the same component. And adding this subscription is completely enough for having this whole component re-render every time a beer with this ID changes. And yeah, that's basically it. The GraphQL generated file is a result from running yarn relay. And on the bottom, we see how to add GraphQL-ws. So here, you just import your client. You define where the client is. So this all looks familiar from the example before. You do a fetch or subscribe, which just does exactly the same thing, prettifies the error, stringifies the IDs, and gives you the responses. All of this is, as I said, in the recipes of GraphQL-ws, and you can see how you can integrate it on your own. One more thing that I would like to share is that the reason why this function is named fetch or subscribe is because you can use the exact same function for both fetch and subscribe. So if we would now switch the fetch relay part with fetch or subscribe, you would have GraphQL running completely over WebSockets, queries, mutations, and subscriptions.
Are there any advantages to running queries over subscription?
So people are talking about a hybrid connection. What this means is that you have the regular requests going through HTTP, but as soon as you create a subscription or a GraphQL-ws connection, you transition to running the rest of the queries through the existing WebSocket connection. The benefits are the usual ones, like not having the overhead of re-authenticating the client and passing a huge headers message with authentication tokens and relevant information, relevant contextual information about the client. You rather have a single long living connection, which is guaranteed to have the server on one side and the client on the other side.
And why would people have not been doing that so far along with the old library? Because before it was kind of bad practice to try to do that.
It was bad practice, but I've had people coming in which had a full WebSocket transport for GraphQL, and some of the reasons were that you might not be able to even do HTTP requests. You might have a requirement to using WebSockets only. For whatever reason that is, maybe the server doesn't even implement an HTTP, but does implement a WebSocket server. And the reason why you don't use that is one more reason, and that is that firewalls, some of the legacy firewalls, still reject upgrade headers from HTTP requests. And as we all know, the WebSocket connection starts with an HTTP request with an upgrade header, requiring the server to upgrade the connection to a WebSocket. And some of the corporate firewalls just cut this off immediately. So you might not be even able to use WebSockets in certain environments where these obsolete firewalls are installed. And then you, of course, have the benefit of nice dev tools and nice monitoring. So usually the browser applications can be hooked up with reporting tools that just monitor all outgoing HTTP requests and give you a nice timeline of what the app was doing. Whereas with GraphQL-ws, you have to add such an implementation yourself. So you would have to hook up into the next and the error and the complete callbacks of the client to get all of those information out. Those are some of the things that I could bring up from the top of my head. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really great. Relay is one of those libraries that people really need to look into more. Like, yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, because the Yarn Relay, so that what that's doing, because you talked about the store, and basically it's looking at all of your queries, and so this whole fragment-driven approach is having your components define its data requirements or its data dependencies. I think that's what they refer to it as. And then that Yarn Relay command is scanning all those components, building out a list of what actually needs to be fetched. And then it just plumbs it back down to those components without needing any kind of prop drilling or anything else. It just maps up automagically, basically. Yeah.
A lot of things happen on the build time. And basically the whole idea initially with Relay is to support low-end devices like old mobile phones or things that have very, very little memory. So the whole thing and how it works is quite optimized. But the beauty of it really, and I'm an avid fan of Relay, is that exactly as you described, you get a schema and you cannot query anything outside of it. And the beauty behind this is that not only do you get the typings of TypeScript, if your database changes, which is often the case with an application, you get the new schema and you try compiling with Relay. And if some of the fields got changed or some of the fields don't exist no more, you basically can't compile a Relay environment. So you get this full-on type safety connecting the client and the backend out of the box. Yes, it does require a bit of configuration, but I think their documentation at relay.dev is pretty good now.
Yeah, especially the Relay Modern. That really solved a lot of the issues people were having. There's still some performance issues during development. If you get a really big schema, I think they're still working on some stuff around that. But yeah, I think that actually takes us to time that we have for the stream today. I want to say thank you so much for coming today, because this was really a fantastic, overview of really what will be the full replacement of subscriptions. Fingers crossed, but that probably is going to be it. And so subscriptions should be becoming even more ubiquitous in GraphQL implementations and frameworks and tooling. And so seeing kind of the start of this getting your head around it now is going to be really great for the community to be working on. So really big thanks for coming out today. We'd love having you at some more GraphQL, some more Hasura events and stuff, because again, subscriptions is kind of that's where things are going. So thanks again for joining us today, and I'll let Adrian come on and send us off. You're muted, so I'll say goodbye for you. He gave you the peace sign.
See, this is why I checked it at the beginning, and then it turned on. It's automatic at this part. But anyway, yeah, that's it, folks. That's the stream.
All right.
Thank you to both of you for coming on and talking about all this. I hope everybody has found it useful and interesting. And if you have any questions, you can always follow up with us later. You don't have to ask them here. Just find us. We're all over the internet, and we'll be happy to answer questions for you. On that note, everybody have a great day, and we'll catch you next episode.
Thank you.